Okay, so we're in 724, number 82, and this is it. We're going to do this one problem today in class. This is a short day, but we've got time to do this. You've got 3 proofs that you're going to be putting together today. Okay, so we're just practicing with proofs. I'm not going to write the proofs up on the board for you to copy. This is one of those things where you've got to sit down and give it a shot. I will give you some hints in the form of sort of just the structure of the proof. Let's talk about part A first. So we are going to prove something that we have already learned. Way back in chapter 1, we learned about isosceles triangles. You already knew that isosceles triangles had 2 equal sides. What we learned in chapter 1 is that it had 2 equal angles as well. Right? So if these 2 sides are congruent, then angle A and angle C must also be congruent. We're going to prove that today, and we're going to prove that by drawing a line down the center and dealing with 2 congruent triangles. So go ahead in your notes right now, write down 82A, copy that picture down. And I'd like you to draw yourself a dashed line going right down the center of that triangle. And our goal is going to be to prove that angle A is congruent to angle C. So the way we're going to do this is we're going to prove that we have 2 congruent triangles. If you can prove to me that these 2 triangles on the left and the right are congruent, then that means A and C must be congruent by that thing that we learned last week on Tuesday. Do you guys remember what that was? You'll remember this thing. We wrote it in our notes, I believe. Congruent triangles lead to congruent parts. If you can prove that the triangles are congruent, then these angles would also have to be congruent. So think through this with me. Do you have enough information to prove those 2 triangles congruent? We've got 1 pair of sides here. What else could we mark in our picture? We've got that shared side that we could do by reflexive property. What else can we mark? You want to mark these 2 angles here? So so the question is, can we mark these 2? We can mark them if we are specific about how we drew this line. Okay, so when you draw a line like this is called an auxiliary line, and you can state how you are going to draw it. And if you would like to state that we drew this line so that it bisected angle B up here, we could do that. Would you like to do that? Because then would we have enough information? If we had these 2 angles, what could we use to prove the triangle is congruent? We could use side angle side. So let's state that we did draw that auxiliary line from B to D so that it bisected angle ABC. So this is going to be the first bubble in your proof, is that segment BD bisects angle ABC. We drew segment BD in there, so we have the power to make that distinction, to say that it is going to bisect that. And our reason that we would give for that would be auxiliary line. I didn't spell that correctly, so let me fix that. There's only 1 L in auxiliary, there's 2 I's. Auxiliary. Auxiliary. Usually I just abbreviate this AUX, AUX. You know, like the AUX input on your car stereo. From there, we should be able to prove that the triangles are congruent. We're going to need some sides and angles. So I'll just show you what this is going to look like. If we have bisecting, we can use the definition of a bisector. the definition of a bisector is that two angles are congruent, right? And that's how you decided we wanted to have these congruent, so we went ahead and said that. So it's gonna be your job to fill in the rest of this. These are gonna be your sides and angles that are gonna prove your triangle's congruent. So you'll have your congruent triangles here. We had a suggestion, I want you to check and make sure you agree, but we had a suggestion that we were gonna use SAS for this one. And we know what our last bubble needs to be because we know what we're trying to prove. What are we trying to prove? Trying to prove that A is congruent to C. So that's what our last bubble is gonna be. All right, so go ahead and work on part A right now. I've got some hints for part B and C. I'm going to put them over on the counter where I did before. Your job today in class is to get these 3 proofs finished, okay? And ask lots of questions. If you need a hint, don't hesitate to ask. That's okay. I want us to be getting really good and comfortable with flowchart proofs today because on Friday we're going to be starting 2-column proofs. Okay. So do your best, get your questions answered today. Work with one another. Check on your neighbors, spy on your neighbors. Feel free to spin around in your seat and talk to the people behind you and look at their work. Be willing to show other people your work, even if you're not sure if it's correct. It might give somebody a hint that might help them along. And again, just get my attention and I'll give you some hints. Okay. All right, get after it. Our assignment's going to be the next assignment on the back of your packet. If you are out on Friday for testing, please get my attention today and I will reduce that for you. All right, let's get after it. For the sake of the recording, here's what B is going to look like. So we're trying to prove this. That should go into our last bubble here. And C, the big hint is to split the rectangle up into 2 triangles. Prove that AC is congruent to BD. And that should go in this last bubble here.